Have you ever wondered what truly happened when Lazarus rose from the dead? Lazarus was dead for 4 days. The stench of decay filled the tomb, and all hope had vanished. But then, before a disbelieving crowd, Jesus spoke. And the impossible happened. The dead man moved. What happened there changed history forever. But this resurrection hides an even greater mystery. Where did Lazarus go during those 4 days? What did he see, what did he feel, and why does the Bible remain silent about it? Stick around until the end and discover the truth hidden behind Jesus' most impressive miracle, the resurrection of Lazarus. The resurrection of Lazarus was one of Jesus' greatest miracles. A man who was dead for 4 days returned to life and was an impressive testimony to the power of God and a milestone in Christ's ministry. But before this great sign, Lazarus was more than just a character in the story. He was a close friend of Jesus, someone whose life had profound significance even before the illness that took him to the grave. Lazarus lived in Bethany, a small village about 2 miles from Jerusalem. The city, although discreet, was known for being a refuge for Jesus whenever he visited the region. Bethany was not just a resting point, but a place of communion and welcome. The home of Lazarus and his sisters, Martha and Mary, was a home where the Master found friendship, hospitality, and genuine love. The Gospels emphasize the uniqueness of this family. Martha was practical and active, someone who took care of the details whenever Jesus visited her house. Mary, on the other hand, had a contemplative spirit. While Martha busied herself with the chores, Mary sat at Jesus' feet, absorbing every word. Luke 10:38-42. Lazarus, however, appears shortly before his death and resurrection. But one thing is clear. He was loved by Jesus in a special way. The proof of this is in the words of his sisters when Lazarus became ill. "Lord, the one you love is sick." John 11:3. They didn't need to say anything else. The way Lazarus is described here is not just a detail. Few times in the Gospels is someone referred to in this way by Christ. But what made Lazarus so special? Perhaps he was one of the first men to recognize Jesus not just as a teacher, but as the Messiah. His house was one of the few places where Christ found rest amid the crowds that constantly followed him. Martha, Mary, and Lazarus were not just disciples, they were friends. Unlike the 12 apostles who often had difficulty understanding Christ's mission, this family seemed to understand who he was in a more intimate way. And it was in this house that one of the most symbolic events in Jesus' journey took place. Even before the resurrection of Lazarus, Mary anointed Jesus' feet with an extremely expensive perfume and wiped them with her hair. John 12:3. This act of profound spiritual value foreshadowed Christ's burial, which would take place shortly after. Lazarus was part of this family of faith. His name, curiously enough, means God helped, a prophetic indication of what was to come. His life before his illness was marked by the presence of Jesus in his home, the learning he shared with his sisters, and the sincere love that existed between him and the Master. But then everything changed. Lazarus became ill suddenly. The illness was not common as his condition quickly worsened. Martha and Mary, who had seen Jesus heal so many sick people, knew he could do something. They believed that upon learning of Lazarus's condition, he would come without delay. After all, it was not just any request, it was about a dear friend. They didn't doubt, they trusted. But time passed, and Jesus didn't appear. Lazarus was sick. It wasn't a passing fever or a simple discomfort. His condition was rapidly deteriorating, and Martha and Mary began to realize that the situation was spiraling out of control. Bethany was not a distant city, and they knew that if Jesus came, he could heal him. After all, he had done it before, healed the blind, cleansed lepers, and freed the demon-possessed. Healing a friend wouldn't be difficult. The message was sent without hesitation. "Lord, the one you love is sick." John 11:3. There was no explicit request. Martha and Mary knew that Jesus' love for Lazarus was enough for him to understand the urgency of the message. But then something unexpected happened. Jesus didn't leave immediately when he received the news. He didn't show any hurry. On the contrary, he said something enigmatic to the disciples. This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God. John 11:4. 2 days passed, and Lazarus died without Jesus even starting his journey to Bethany. Martha and Mary, who were anxiously awaiting his arrival, saw their brother close his eyes for the last time. The body was prepared according to Jewish tradition, wrapped in linen cloths and buried in a cave sealed by a large stone. God's silence had been deafening. What was Jesus doing? For the disciples, this delay seemed a mystery. When he finally decided to leave, Jesus made another surprising statement. "Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I am going to wake him up." John 11:11. The disciples didn't understand. If he was just sleeping, then there was no reason to worry. But then Jesus spoke clearly. Lazarus is dead. The shock was unavoidable, but once again Jesus added something that defied human understanding. "And for your sake, I am glad I was not there so that you may believe." John 11:15. Jesus' delay was not an oversight. It was a choice. But in Bethany, Martha and Mary didn't know this. For them, Jesus' silence was painful. When they finally buried Lazarus, their hearts were full of unanswered questions. Where was the Master? Why didn't he come? Why didn't he heal his friend? Meanwhile, Jesus was heading towards a miracle that would change everything. Silence can be heavier than death. Time moved forward in Bethany, but the answers didn't come. Martha and Mary watched the horizon, hoping for a miracle that never arrived. Lazarus's body no longer sustained life. His eyes, which once sparkled when listening to Jesus' teachings, were now closed forever. His chest no longer breathed, his hands no longer touched. His lips never spoke words again. Lazarus was dead. The preparations for the burial were quick. It was necessary to act before decomposition began to manifest irreversibly. In a warm environment like Judea, the flesh of the dead deteriorated rapidly. There was no time to lose. The body was washed, anointed with aromatic oils, and wrapped in linen strips according to custom. Martha and Mary were devastated. As the servants finished the funeral rites, friends and neighbors began to arrive. Mourning was an essential part of Jewish culture, and the house filled with weeping and lamentations. Some came from Jerusalem to mourn with them. Others just looked on with sorrow. But there were also those who murmured among themselves, "If Jesus really loved them, why didn't he come? If he healed so many, why did he let his friend die?" Lazarus's body was taken to the entrance of the tomb. It was a cave carved into the rock, as was common among families of good financial standing. Inside, there was a carved bed where the body was carefully placed. Then a heavy stone was rolled to seal the entrance. The cave became dark. The tomb was now Lazarus's home, and that was the end. The first day passed, and visits continued. Jesus' silence was deafening. The second day brought with it emptiness and a sense of abandonment. On the third day, there was nothing left but acceptance of the loss, but it was on the fourth day that the last drop of hope died. Jewish tradition said that the spirit of the dead remained close to the body for up to 3 days. After that, death was considered irreversible. Lazarus's body was already decomposing, and the smell was unbearable. The women who visited the tomb wept, but they no longer expected anything other than oblivion. Mourning became an immutable reality, but it was at that moment, when all possibilities had been exhausted, when time had already made its final sentence, that a figure appeared on the dusty road leading to Bethany. Jesus is arriving. The meeting of Jesus with the pain of humanity. When everything seemed lost, Jesus finally arrived. The path to Bethany was narrow and dry, winding through the hills of Judea. Dust rises with the steps of the Master and his disciples. He was returning near Jerusalem, to a dangerous territory where the Pharisees were already plotting against his life. But there was something more urgent than his own safety: the tomb of a friend. The news of his arrival spread quickly. Martha, upon hearing that Jesus was near the village, did not wait for him to reach her house. She got up immediately and ran to meet him. Her heart was filled with contradictory emotions: pain, sadness, hope, frustration. And when she finally stood before him, the words escaped her lips like a contained plea. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." John 11:21. It was not an accusation, it was a lament. Martha knew that Jesus had power over life and death, but now everything seemed too late. Her brother had been dead for 4 days. What could be done now? But then Jesus answered something unexpected. "Your brother will rise again." Martha hesitated. She knew the scriptures and believed in the resurrection of the dead on the last day. She replied, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." But Jesus looked her in the eyes and declared something that would forever change the understanding of what life and death are. "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die." Do you believe this? John 11:25-26. This was not just a promise for the future, it was a revelation of the present. Resurrection was not just an event waiting at the end of time. Resurrection was before her. Life was there, standing, looking into her eyes. "Yes, Lord," Martha replied. "I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew who was standing before her. Martha went home and secretly called Mary. "The Master is here and is calling for you." Mary, who until then had remained inside the house, got up immediately. But when she saw Jesus, she couldn't contain her pain. She fell at his feet, tears rolling down her face, and repeated the same words as her sister. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Jesus saw Mary crying, saw the families, friends lamenting, felt the weight of death and sadness that filled that place. Then something extraordinary happened. Jesus was deeply moved. The word used in the original Greek for moved here, embrimaomai, doesn't just mean a light feeling of sadness. It means an intense disturbance, a deep indignation. Jesus was not just sad. He was indignant with death, with the pain, with the devastation that sin brought to the world. He who created man for life now saw the maximum effect of the separation caused by sin. And then Jesus wept. The creator of the universe, he who had power over all things, wept. Jesus' tears were not of despair because he knew what he was about to do. They were tears of compassion. He felt the pain of those sisters. He felt the pain of all humanity in the face of death. Those around whispered, "See how he loved him." But others questioned, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying?" They didn't know Lazarus' death was not the end of the story. Jesus wiped the tears from his face and headed towards the tomb. Something that had never been seen before was about to happen. The call that breaks death. "Lazarus, come forth." The crowd followed Jesus to the tomb. Murmurs spread among those present. Some were still crying, others observed with skepticism. The air was charged with expectation and disbelief. Then Jesus stopped before the cave sealed by the large stone. The silence was absolute. The place of death would now become the scene of something never seen before. Jesus raised his eyes and commanded, "Take away the stone." John 11:39. The request seemed absurd. Glances crossed in shock. Martha, who trusted the Master so much, hesitated. "Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days." Death had already done its work. Why open a tomb that would only bring more pain? But Jesus looked at her and said firmly, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" John 11:40. The stone couldn't prevent God's power. The miracle was about to happen. The men who were there obeyed the order, even though doubt persisted in their hearts. The stone was removed, revealing the darkness and the foul odor that came from inside the tomb. At that moment, time seemed to stop. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the entrance of the cave. Jesus raised his voice, and with an authority that echoed throughout Bethany exclaimed, "Lazarus, come forth." John 11:43. And then the impossible happened. In the silence of death, a sound began to be heard inside the tomb, a slight creaking, an imperceptible murmur, a timid movement. Lazarus's body, still wrapped in strips of cloth, began to move. Those present stepped back, seized by fear and wonder. Lazarus staggered to the entrance of the tomb. His eyes were covered by the bandages, his pale face was marked by death, but he was alive. He was there, standing before everyone, a testament to the power of Jesus, an example of God's love. Resurrection had happened. Jesus then said, "Loose him and let him go." John 11:44. The order was clear and immediate. The servants approached Lazarus and removed the bandages that bound him. He was free. He could walk, he could speak, he could live again. The crowd erupted in exclamations of joy and amazement. Some ran to tell the news. Others knelt in adoration and recognition. The Master had conquered death. Life had triumphed over the tomb. On that day, Bethany became a symbol of hope. The story of resurrected Lazarus spread throughout the region, and many believed in Jesus as the Messiah. The resurrection of Lazarus was not just an isolated miracle. It was a demonstration of God's power to transform the lives of all those who believe in him. Lazarus returned to life, but his experience in the world of the dead remains a mystery. What happened to him during those 4 days? Where did he go? What did he see? What did he feel? The Bible remains silent about this, but the truth is that his life after the resurrection was never the same. He became a living witness to the power of Jesus, a sign of hope for all those who felt lost and desperate. And the question that remains is, do you believe that Jesus is the resurrection and the life? Do you believe that he can transform your life just as he transformed the life of Lazarus? Imagine standing there witnessing such an incredible event. What would you have felt? Fear? Awe? Disbelief? The resurrection of Lazarus was more than just a spectacle. It was a profound moment of revelation. What was it like for Lazarus in those 4 days? Her descent into darkness or an ascent into light? Did he experience the judgment of God or the comfort of angels? The Bible doesn't say, but perhaps his silence speaks volumes. What if he saw something so sacred, so beyond human comprehension, that words simply failed him? Think about it. A man dead for 4 days, his body already decaying, brought back to life by a single command. Can you fathom the impact that would have on his faith, on his understanding of the universe? What would it be like to look into the eyes of Jesus after such an experience? This story wasn't just about Lazarus. It was about the power of Jesus. He demonstrated that death has no hold over those who believe in him. This was a glimpse of the promise of eternal life, a taste of what awaits those who follow Christ. But the story doesn't end there. The Pharisees, threatened by Jesus' growing popularity and power, saw Lazarus as a dangerous reminder of the miracle. They began to plot against both Jesus and Lazarus, seeking to silence the truth. John 12:10. Consider this. Lazarus had been given a second chance at life, but that second chance put him in mortal danger. Would he hide, fearful of the Pharisees, or would he boldly proclaim the truth of Jesus? The tension builds as the religious leaders conspire, and Lazarus's very existence becomes a challenge to their authority. Would he be silenced, or would his story continue to inspire faith and hope? What happened to Lazarus after his resurrection? Did he live a long and happy life? Did he continue to follow Jesus, spreading the gospel? Or was his life cut short by those who sought to extinguish the light of Christ? Stay tuned to discover a little-known detail about Lazarus's fate. Against all human logic, the stone was moved. An oppressive odor escaped, a stark reminder of the death within. Jesus, unwavering, stared into the darkness. The crowd held its breath, a mixture of hope and dread filling the air. Then, with a voice that echoed with divine authority, Jesus cried out, "Lazarus, come forth." John 11:43. Time seemed to stand still. Everyone strained to hear, to see. Was it possible? Could a dead man truly respond? From the depths of the tomb, a stirring. Then, a shuffling. A figure, bound in burial cloths, appeared at the entrance. It was Lazarus alive. The crowd erupted in a cacophony of gasps, cries, and shouts of praise. Jesus, with gentle authority, commanded, "Loose him and let him go." John 11:44. Servants rushed forward, unwrapping Lazarus from his grave clothes. He blinked in the sunlight, a man reborn. What does this tell us? What does it mean? The resurrection of Lazarus is more than just a miracle. It's a powerful symbol of hope, a testament to Jesus' power over death and despair. It's a promise that even in our darkest moments, new life is possible. How can you apply this to your life today? Perhaps you're facing a seemingly impossible situation, a dead end. Remember Lazarus. Remember that with faith, even the most hopeless situations can be transformed. Take a moment to reflect on this. What stones are blocking you from experiencing new life, from realizing your full potential? What fears, what doubts, what regrets are holding you captive? Now I have a call for action. If this story inspired you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video to your friends. Also, I want to ask what part of this video impacted you the most? Tell us in the comments down below. Be inspired with the powerful message, and don't forget, God is the resurrection and the life.